whatever your preference is, I need to send it to George, or we need to send it to George when it's done.
Okay.
But we usually will do the recording after we kind of get through all the logistical things of saying hello and all that, and then we'll do the recording.
I always find it easier to save it on your computer because then introductions, and we're missing a few people. So, but it is 4:08, so I think we should get started and reward those of you who are here on time. So we thought we'd go around with introductions and just to remind everybody who you are, who you're with, where you are in the program. But we're curious to hear how the Delia must have people walking by her.
No, Julie is muted again. So I'm just sort of waving to go, I acknowledge that. She's stuck. So
And Ethan is too. Ethan is also muted and doesn't know
there we go.
what to do about it. Well, did we contact?
Can you hear me?
Oh, now you're good.
Now
we can hear you, Ethan.
Woo!
This is how Mary's going to spend the entire meeting. I'm muting everyone.
We only need to unmute Julia. So we also were curious to hear how your year-end giving experience is going in the pandemic. So whoever would like to start.
I'm happy to start. Drinking from a fire hose. We have done in 2 weeks what took us 4 weeks last year.
Wow.
So
Congrats.
It's a great problem to have, but it's my eyes are crossing. Yeah, sounds like everybody's a little bit busy. Yeah, at any rate.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost a perfect storm. We have the new incoming donations and the new funds, but then I have people who are working on their bequests and their legacy plans and the planned giving, which isn't necessarily timed to year end, but it's timely. So and a lot of stock gifts actually as well this year, which is fun and exciting. So it's busy, which is a good thing. It's a good thing, charitably.
We're seeing the same thing. We're seeing a much bigger end of year flurry for, largely donors setting up new funds, and quite a few that are moving appreciated stocks just because of market performance recently, right? They're just, kind of making that choice, I guess, at this point at year end. And so we've seen probably more of an uptick in that than we normally do as well.
In a lot of inquiries as well, coming from a large organization, the American Cancer Society, people don't even know where to send anything right now. So, processes and, just processes have changed. So along with me being confused, they're confused. So we've just had a lot of inquiries, which has been great. People that would normally just kind of hit the donate button or mail in their check, they're wanting to make sure it's going to the right place. So it's kind of opened up some nice conversations.
It's a nice byproduct of people having a lot of questions because things are different. So that's actually, we've had that too.
Yeah.
From a nonprofit standpoint, with community volunteers in medicine, supported year to year by philanthropic sources, we're doing quite well. Our board set a very aggressive goal for fiscal 21, which is $3.4 million. And we gulped and we were like, oh my gosh, there's a pending recession that we're in, and there's a pandemic, but we're ahead of pace from last year. So we're doing quite well. We're seeing a lot of folks come back to us after a little bit of a lapse. We submitted our fall appeal back at the week after Election Day. We probably should have done that sooner, quite frankly, but people paid attention to it. And we've gotten a lot of inquiries since. So there's been a lot of COVID grant funding as well, still coming to us, which we're very concerned about. But we're ahead of pace from where we were previous. But there's been new folks that have come to us and said, we want to support you. How can we do that? And a lot of donor advised fund gifts this year, more so than the past 2 years when I saw that. So that's what's happening there.
The question for the newcomers on the call, wonderful to see you, Kaya, and Joan, I think, with her Christmas background. The question is introducing yourself, reminding everybody who you are, but then how is your year-end giving being impacted in this pandemic period?
So this is JR. Sorry, Lou, you want to go?
No, go ahead, JR.
So I'm in a little little different world, and then I'm not with a 501c3 or any kind of a charity. But I mean, we're busier than ever. In fact, Lou and I tried to have breakfast a couple of weeks ago. He couldn't do it. Lou, you canceled me before I canceled you. So
yeah, I had a good reason at the end. I'll tell you about in a minute. Go ahead, JR.
But in this world, we are doing a lot of charitable distributions from IRAs and getting those sent out for our clients. And a couple of clients contributing money to donor advised funds of appreciated stock, not money, appreciated stock. So, very tied in. But I've never been busier, and I'm struggling to get the coursework done. I really am. I mean, like I set aside 3 more hours this afternoon, and I just got deluged with client stuff that couldn't wait. So I'll get it done. I feel like I'm in high school.
I'm right there with you, JR. I did set my date though, late January.
Congrats.
Good.
Lou Titai here. It's been an interesting year end for me, but as a practicing lawyer, to answer Mary Francis's, I'm sorry.
Nassib, Fisher Nassib.
Francis's question
Francis.
about how the year end gifting has been. Frankly, we don't see that as practitioners, lawyers anyway, unless it's going to get into the topic that I'm leading on tonight on positioning your practice and your process, because it's a real dilemma for me. I'm intrigued by this whole process and Phil's presentation and especially the 2 gentlemen that he had leading the discussion in his tape on this section. But the point is that, frankly, if my clients are being philanthropic at year end, I'm not hearing about it unless they're asking me questions, as JR mentioned, about the charitable gift, the charitable IRA, rollover gifts, which frankly, it's confusing clients. They hear about the RMD being extended to 72, and they're confusing RMD with the fact that you can take the money out of the charitable even if you're over 70.5.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of stuff there, but educating the clients has been, I think, my biggest challenge, not only with respect to current philanthropy, but as I'll get into in our discussion on this whole concept of our seat at the table. It really is a challenge as a practitioner, and I'm anxious to talk about it. But the other thing I intimated to JR that I had a good reason, without getting into the gory details. I was COVID positive on November 30th. So this is my 16th day of quarantine, and feeling fine, doing great, really symptomatically. I really did not have much to be concerned about. My wife and my son, Jeff, who's 28 and lives with us, were also COVID positive right after me. So the 3 of us have been living in a COVID quarantine world for that period. I'm thankful, frankly, that it really was very tolerable, and I'm ready to get outside. I haven't been out since November 30th. So, but anyway, that's the other reason, JR. I didn't want to get into all that stuff with you, but that's the reason I had to cancel. I'm looking forward to our date in January. So thanks.
Yeah. So does that mean you won't get the vaccine?
No, it doesn't. Without getting into, it's interesting because I know a lot of people like to hear more about this, but having had it now and having had plenty of time to do research and listen, I don't really pay much attention to, forgive me, CNN and the news networks, but I do a lot of research and paying attention to CDC guidelines. The bottom line is that what they're generally saying is that if you've been COVID positive for the next 90 days, it's relatively safe that you're not a transmitter, nor could you get it again. But after 90 days, Frank, there's no real good research as to what happens. And to answer your question, I'm quite anxious to get the vaccine whenever it's ready and available for somebody in my demographic. It's interesting. I know a lot of people are anxious about it. So am I. I'm anxious to get it. So my docs are saying get the vaccine when you're offered it. So
yeah, I was gonna say, Lou, I can only say my neighbor is a nurse and works in a facility, and she was COVID positive, and after she was negative, she got the antibody test 2.5 months after, and there was nothing at all. So they're saying, some people are saying it's not even 3 months that you're.
Yeah, it's interesting. So
Lou, I'm glad you're doing well though, you and your family.
Thanks. I'm sorry to get into all the gory details, and I didn't want to impose on your time, but I was just trying to explain to JR what was happening. So thanks for listening.
Glad you're better.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yes, glad.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to share about how their year-end experience is being impacted by the pandemic? Maybe it's not about year-end giving, maybe it's about, I'm not sure. Something else.
Rebecca, did you already talk about us?
Our flurry,
Yeah.
our flurry of activity.
Yes, yes, quite a flurry.
Well,
Maya, can you-
I would say from a planning perspective, people are much more conscious of having their affairs in order. And, you know, I guess they're more conscious of their, you know, their mortality, their invincibility. They're not invincible as I thought they might be. And all of that ties into what we all do, right? I mean, it's part of it. People are also, I find, are being more generous in general, you know, no doubt about that.
Yes, and actually, I think we have had an experience the other day on Thanksgiving. We had a $100,000 anonymous donor come forward for our response fund, which is great because now we're shooting for $1 million. But her advisors specifically said that she was taking advantage of the CARES Act provision around the IRA distribution, but also the fact that the percentage of your AGI that you can donate is so much, that it's not as restricted, that they're really encouraging people to donate. And so that was really wonderful to see. Advisors we had a really, really good conversation with the advisors. They were with a company called Northern Trust and out of Chicago, but they now have a Philly office. And we were really impressed with the quality of the conversation. So just to remember the name, because I think you're going to see them really expanding in this area with wealthy individuals and foundations. It was a conversation that reminded me of our group, actually.
You said that was Northern Trust, Francis?
Yeah.
So I lived in Chicago for a while, Francis, and yes, I have several colleagues who work for Northern Trust. It's an excellent financial institution.
Yeah, I've got several clients that have their trust assets at Northern Trust. It is top notch.
You know, this just comment isn't necessarily about end of the year giving, but surprisingly, so I'm with the American Cancer Society. This year, our planned giving bucket, as you will, is the #1 revenue source for the organization. So because events and in-person giving really took a beating this year, we jumped from #2 to #1 by a long shot. And it's really interesting to see the culture within the organization, within all of American Cancer Society. There's only 20 of us that are planned giving directors. So we're a pretty mighty force to be bringing in, a very small mighty force to be bringing in the largest revenue stream in the organization. So culturally, it's kind of fun internally to suddenly be getting lots of notice and lots of praise for those seeds that we've planted for years and years and years. So just again, a little bit of a culture shift.
Why do you think that is, Joey? Why is it suddenly taking off?
I don't know that we are taking off as much as in-person donations kind of came to a screeching halt this year. All of our events, our Relay for Life, our galas, our golf, our huge bike-a-thon that's in Philly, all of them did, fairly well virtually. But that type of revenue stream for the organization just really took a beating this year. So that allowed us that sustainable revenue to suddenly just, shine, which is nice.
So here's another story for you, and it's related to year-end giving. So CVIM, on a normal basis, has medical students that do their rotations from the various medical schools around here. And we got a call last Monday from a gentleman in Washington, D.C., who's a consulting firm owner, if you will. And his daughter did her rotation, her medical rotation from Temple, it's like 6-7 years ago. And so he said, this year I want to do something different. I'm actually asking my kids where they want their charities, what's their charity of choice, and how can I help them? And his daughter said, you definitely got to do community volunteers in medicine, CVIM. And so he donated $25,000, and his partner of the agency matched that. And this is what we call a CVI-ism, because it does exist. And it's through the kindness of people. But I can only say that that's probably related to year end. And then just the impact that our mission had on this gentleman's daughter while she was going through medical school, for her to remember us still in her busy time right now as a physician is really special. So just thinking of what has transpired over the past week.
Nice.
Who else has not introduced themselves or shared a little bit, just to get us going? Julia, you're on mute.
Yep,
Let's see if you can.
Mary's job.
Julia continues to remain muted.
I think Mary's been unmute her.
Mary took her off. There you go.
Here I am. Yay. It Okay, takes so
3
clicks.
Power.
apologize in advance for barking dogs or, children.
Mary's amazing.
But my role is very unique because I write grants for a living, right? So, when I look at how the American College is done, it's from that grants focus. So I have colleagues who work in planned giving and, alumni relations, but it's not my world. So when I look at, how has this pandemic affected grants, it's affected us tremendously because our focus is higher ed. So, we've had funders, for example, Pacific Life Foundation. We have a good relationship with them. They funded our Veterans Center for years. They sent us an email saying, hey, listen, if you need to move that money from, where it was allocated to for the Veterans Center to something else to help cover your, expenses or whatever it is you deem necessary, go ahead. And that was really, we didn't end up moving it, but that was really impactful because that never happens. If anything, you write a grant and you have to report back saying exactly how you spent that money. And if you didn't spend it the way you wrote it, you run the risk of them saying, okay, give me back the money that I granted to you. So that was really nice. That was really nice to see the flexibility from a corporate foundation standpoint. And I think from the little that I know, unfortunately, so the American College has a big insurance portfolio. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we have had a few death claims, which of course increases our revenue, but it's a sad reality. So we've done well because of situations like this, but it's sad to think that, where the money is coming from and why.
Julia. I think Delia and Kaya were the only 2 people we hadn't heard from. If you want to share.
Well, hi, everyone. I apologize for being late. I had a dog that experienced snow for the first time and would not come back in the house.
That was my dog yesterday.
Chased him down the street. I serve on a few boards. I'm not actively fundraising right now for any specific organization, but on the boards that I serve, we're starting to have some conversation just about, life after these COVID grants. I think they created a bit of a umbrella for people to not necessarily have to focus specifically on some of the areas that funding has been needed, like general operating and specifically looking at your programs and making sure whatever you're determining to do going forward in light of COVID to your service model, that it gets from a policy and practice perspective, that it's clear and solidified and that you are measuring your outcomes, because despite whether it's COVID or not, funders are going to ultimately come back and ask you what the return on investment is with the resources. And so I find that I'm having a lot of those conversations with my clients. and with the boards that I'm currently serving on, two of the organizations that I'm working with right now did their year-end appeal, and we had a whole back and forth just about, what's your message, and how do you make it resonate, because everyone's kind of telling the same story to a certain degree, but how do you really differentiate yourself in talking about, the nature of how your values are playing out in light of everything that's going on. So you're not, just kind of resting on the narrative of COVID, but it's, in light of everything, how have we managed to stay strong and be true to our brand and responsive to the individuals we have the pleasure of serving alongside. And so I think that's probably a little bit different than most organizations are thinking in the direction that they're taking. But I think those are conversations that need to be had. So a lot of my time has just been spent in the, what does life look like after, and how does your program model and your business model sustain going forward, in light of what's going on. So
Interesting.
that's all I have.
Funny.
I was going to say, likewise, other organizations, our benefactors who have passed away, plan giving does tend to be the strongest area of income at this point in time, unfortunately. Lost a lot of good people, but by the same token, the university can use it. Some of our other current gifts are just not as at a level where we wish they could be, especially given the pandemic, but we're hopeful and continuing to move forward. So similar situation. Yeah.
Okay. I think, Mary, you were going to turn to Julia and ask her if there were any logistics questions. Do people get questions answered about the testing window for the class, the 839 class?
Yeah, I'd like to say thanks to JR, because we had originally had our testing window as January 17th, but there was extension to January 31st. Is everyone scheduled now? Is anyone not scheduled? Okay.
Scheduled, yeah.
I have to schedule my first course here, and mine's actually I contacted the office at American College, and they said that the end of February is the end of my testing.
That's right, Jason. Yes, you and one other person have until February 28th because you joined late, right?
We joined late, and plus I took a brief sabbatical just because of when COVID hit, and I had my 5-year-old and 2-year-old. Yes, I'm blaming my kids home with me. I couldn't find any time to study. Now they're back at school. So anyway.
And your dog ate your homework. That's
yes,
okay.
Exactly.
You have to the 28th, so you're good. All right, so that sounds like everybody's moving along there. And I think we actually have a question about whether or not you can get the materials for 849 if you haven't tested for 839 yet. And if you were solo, I believe you cannot get your materials until you test.
Right.
Because we're part of this group, we want to have everyone have the opportunity to prepare for the next meeting. So I spoke to Elaine, I believe yesterday or the day before, and she said that this week she's going to be sending it all out. Look for that confirmation email from the college regarding that, and hang on to it because you'll need it, I guess, for registration time. So stay tuned on that.
Thanks, Mary, for checking up on that.
Sure, no worries.
And just to say, I'm taking 849 now, and I work with Deanne quite closely. When you guys get to assignment 3, maybe not Lou, but it's a bear if you're not an attorney. So it's quite something. So Deanne said that if we want to, as a group, after everybody has gone through it, because you have to complete all of the slides to fully understand it, she can review it with us, 3 and 4. So just to put it out there in advance and to, get you guys psychologically ready for it.
Terrific.
It took me so long.
Thanks for letting me know. Now I'm sweating.
I'm sorry. I wasn't emotionally prepared. And then I started and I thought,
Yeah.
oh my
I
God.
agree, because I'm not an attorney either, and yeah. But
Yeah.
you know what? If I who's the guy who used to be the head of AFP, tall guy, recently?
Oh, Christopher
He said,
Jungers.
yes, he said to me, Francis, if I could do it, you can do it. And he was right. And if I can do it, you can do it.
Great.
Same here. If I can get through it, you guys can get through it. I wanted to quickly ask, is anybody taking their exam for 839 online, or are you all going in person, or?
I think I'll be doing mine online.
Okay, because it was just a really very odd experience, and it really threw me off on that first one. Once I did it, then the next two I found much easier, but it's just a little odd. So reach out to me if I can help, just give you any tips or kind of tell you. I don't want to bore everybody with it if you're all not doing it, but yeah, it's just a little unique.
Joey, did you do that online or in person?
Online. I did all three of mine online. That was the only choice at the time.
And Julia, I think you did yours online as well, right?
Yeah, I did. And it is odd. I know what you mean. It's weird.
You have to clear out your desk and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, and they're watching you. You don't see them, but they're, so they comment every now and then to.
Can I write answers on my hand? Like,
no, you can't even have a pen or anything. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
They make you turn your laptop around to show them that you have nothing on your desk.
Yeah.
You have to clear everything out. You know, there can be, you have to be in a room with like no one there. So of course it was the day my kids were in school.
After your initial description about that, Julia decided to go into Philly and say the heck with that nonsense, and I'll just show up. I don't care.
I'm with you, Julia.
Oh God.
It seemed like so much trouble, and I thought there's no way I'm going to go 2 hours with no issues that they're going to have a problem with.
Precisely.
Yeah. I didn't find that it was a hassle. I just found it was really distracting. That while I was, while I was already stressing over answering the questions, they chimed in and said, "Please remove your hand from your mouth." And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I was sitting like this or something. It was like, oh my gosh, and then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, did I do it again? It was just interesting having somebody. But the next two, honestly, I was like, I'm gonna care less about it, and I'm just gonna focus. And I did much better. So
I might be changing my mind, because if you saw what I'm looking at right here across my desk, which goes from there to there,
yeah,
it's like a hurricane went through. So I might be changing my plan.
It's your strategic filing system on your desktop, known only unto you. But
That's
they
right.
look at it and they go, "What is that?" So
That's right.
They're not moving after love nor money. Nope.
Yeah, the biggest problem I had is when I'm focused, I read to myself out loud.
right.
oh, yep.
So if they can't hear me, it might look like I'm talking to someone, but there was nobody there, and I don't even realize I do it. And I do it all the time, not just with tests. When I'm focused on something, if I'm writing a grant, I'll read a paragraph out to myself out loud. It's just a habit that I have. So I might end up doing 849 in person because there's some calculations, and I don't know. I don't want to get in trouble.
Just wear your hazmat suit, Julia. You'll be fine.
I know. Oh, that's the thing. I'll go.
Oh,
Yeah.
JR wants to talk. Should we let him?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm so sorry about this.
And then we probably should get back to the agenda.
I don't have anything to say. I just wanted to be available.
All right.
All right.
So Mary, should we jump into the three cases?
Three leaders, yeah.
Okay. Well, we have them in order, Rebecca, Lou, and Ethan, but it doesn't mean that they can't duke it out for if somebody else would prefer to go first. But Rebecca, the floor is yours with the case of Forest Primeval.
Thank you, Francis. So I found it interesting, the scenario they presented as they were kind of talking through this. I mean, it's in my mind, it was really fascinating to me because I'm really fascinated by family dynamics and people and the things that you see in different families and the way that they interact or don't interact, you know, and the scenario they presented with the two kids that, you know, were just diametrically opposed and clearly, you know, completely on other sides of things philosophically. And I guess, and so what it, so I was, you know, obviously it was presented really in the context of, you know, largely an attorney, you know, and, you know, the idea of this conflict issue, you know, and so I guess it's sort of a two-part question or thought to present. I mean, one, obviously I'd be curious if Lou, you know, kind of if he's ever really been put in a position like that, even on, you know, a smaller scale than, you know, a big multi-generational family. But I also wonder from the other folks, like the community foundation folks, you know, just I guess just because it's not as much of a legal conflict, but it's no different from a how it feels ethical conflict of what do you do when you're theoretically sort of answering to multiple advisors of the family, you know, multiple members as part of a committee deciding what to advise fund, and you've got some sort of conflict of, you know, varying levels. And so I just would sort of be curious what folks thought about experience dealing with things like that, or how they feel about how do you think you might resolve that kind of conflict in who you're answering to. Because again, if they're both advisors, but they're somehow it's come to you that, you know, Bob's upset because Mary wants to do X, then she used up all the available spendable, and now he's mad and doesn't want her to be allowed to do that. And, you know, I'd just be curious, you know, even the community foundation folks or other donors dealing with even, you know, even Jason, you know, if you're talking to donors potentially, you know, even spouses talking about a big gift. I mean, it's, you know, we're all human. So it's, you know, frequently we're not on the same page as our partners or parents or children, or so I'd just be curious to see what people's experience is with dealing with those situations.
They let off as 60% of estate plans fail because of the family dynamic situation, which was just like, whoa, wow, that was, you know, really good. But I too thought about Lou as well, because Lou, I know last month you had shared that, you know, you're in these meetings and charitable giving is really not the first and foremost thing you talk about. It's more so, you know, I think you had said the fourth, or I can't remember exactly, but then you finally get into that. But I thought about you too, just being the, you know, attorney on our group here.
Well, when I was looking at it, first of all, I think the most important thing from an attorney's point of view, and I think we're all coming at it from a different angle, but as the attorney involved in that case, I think the critical thing is making sure that you upfront know and identify and make it clear who your client is. And in my mind, just basically and forgive me because I forgot her name, but is it Meg? Is that her name?
The mom.
Yeah. So in my mind, Meg is the client, but I think it goes further than that. And this will get into what I'm talking about later. But as an attorney, I think your role is to one, make sure that you're loyal to your client and that you're not pressed ethically. And if you feel like you're starting to play at an edge and starting to maybe hit some areas that could potentially be ethically conflicting for you, you need to either say to the people that you're conflicted with, I can't help you. You need your own advisor to help you. I'm first and foremost your mother's representative here, and I'm going to try to work this out. That being said, I think that mediating this case as an attorney is also an important role. And assuming that the clients would all agree, the kid that met with Sarah and Bill and Meg would agree that that I could serve as a mediator in that case, then I would try to bring them to the table. Because I think that from at least the way that Phil presented it, I really think that the case is solvable. I mean, the daughter clearly has philanthropic goals and intentions, and I think that tugs at the heartstrings of the mother anyway. And you know, she's conflicted as to who she's going to decide is going to be right here. But I don't think either of them has to be wrong. I think they can both be right if it's presented properly. So that being said, I think that the responsibility is to Meg and say to Meg, hey, Meg, it's your call. whatever you decide, but let's examine what the ramifications of your decision could be. If you go this way, well, you might lose Meg. Okay, but if you go this way, you might get Bill angry, but Bill's holding pretty much all the cards anyway. He's running the family business, right? And so what's the big deal if we kind of try to figure out a way to make Meg happy and let her pursue her interests and make it a win-win for everybody. So I don't know if that helps, Rebecca, but that's pretty much what I think in terms of at least the role of the attorney there.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because I think, there is more, you have more of a formal responsibility in terms of your ethics and your, how your professional behavior is, has to be in accordance with,
right,
your work as an attorney. To me, it's far more subjective for most of the rest of us who are, working with community foundations or working with nonprofits. I mean, there are no rules really about what we have to do and what do we do. I mean, how do we decide how to make those kinds of decisions? I mean, if you have multiple people connected to a fund, they're all connected to the fund and theoretically in an equal way.
But I think that if you have that situation, and Beth, I would really welcome your experience there too, because you've been doing this for years and years and years. That's the value of bringing the group together and being clear about your own, being psychologically healthy enough yourself so that you don't get sucked into whatever the dysfunction in the family is. That you're aware of any of the anxieties you may be experiencing as a result of the interaction and can manage that constructively, because there's some major dysfunction out there. But Beth, can you think of a particular situation where you had a family where it really helped for you to bring them together and help them arrive at a common goal? Not to put you on the spot.
Let me back up a little bit. So my preference when I get the opportunity, and I think it was Rebecca who mentioned that you have multiple different advisors involved often. My preference when I get the opportunity is to outline how the decisions will be made in advance. And that's something that you learn from experience after having experienced some situations where you didn't do that. And so if we're setting up a donor advised fund where we have multiple advisors, and I actually just set one up the other day with multiple advisors, is sort of outlining how they envision the decision-making process going in advance so that we can actually, when it comes to the grant making responsibility, that we know that they've decided this is the process that we're going to follow. So that's sort of the ultimate preference is, from my perspective, to do that. And Rebecca, I see your preference too. It doesn't always happen that way. I think where I've had difficult situations is I have gathered family members together when there's been a difference in how they want the grants awarded. And I've asked them to kind of, and something that was in one of Phil's remarks was listening to them and getting them to say why they felt the way they did, which may then end up changing the policy going forward. That's where you have a family dynamic which you're stepping into and you're not aware of, and that's often the case you're in as a philanthropic advisor. You're stepping into a family dynamic where you're not sure of the other things that are impacting that family dynamic. And so the listening, it becomes very important, and having the person have their say. And I actually think that's the role that the philanthropic advisor can play, because you are that third party that comes in. You can actually say, let's listen to June or Jody or whoever it is talk about why they feel so important. And I think that respect is given you that they might not have in their own family situation. Lou and I work on a situation where there's a family being that's choosing charity to bring people together, which is not a preferred method. We actually had hoped that had been outlined before that person deceased. But that said, it's taken a couple years of what I will call information and informing and getting people to kind of intervene, to talk to those family members who may be closest. And I think we're beginning to get the family back together. It's going to take a couple years. So, I hate to use that each situation is unique, but each situation is really unique in terms of the family dynamics. And I've seen it all from people who are cutting people out from the get-go, from their charity, to those who want to be as inclusive as possible, but are afraid to make a decision. So I've seen it on both ends of that spectrum. It's fun work when it works out well. I don't know whether that helped. I mean, did that sort of give some thought process?
So should we move on to the next case? Because they are sort of, do you think, Mayor?
Yeah.
The only comment I would make before we leave this case is when we've been in those situations is what we tend to do is lay out the different alternatives they could have, because we find that people are sort of emotionally committed to the way they wanted to do it without knowing that there were other ways that could do it. And I don't know, I kind of had a feeling in that case, you could find a solution that would make them both happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt the same way, Joe, when I read that case and I thought about that. I thought, you know what, kind of thinking through academically what might make sense, and then kind of working with the parties involved to kind of help them come to that conclusion. You know, if you look at it that way, I mean, I agree. Trying to work out a strategy in advance of the meeting does help a philanthropic advisor.
Right.
I thought just before we go on to the next case, the one slide here, which I'm looking at, is who should conduct that discussion. I didn't feel like as though Alex, the attorney that Meg worked with, was, you know, the one that should be doing the conversation. I actually thought it should have been someone like Mary Carter or you know, someone else, not so much Lowell Weiss. That was my first impression, but I could be completely wrong. But does anyone have anything to say about that? I mean, just that I'm incorrect, or
I thought sort of the same thing, Jason, only because the way it was presented in the slides made it sound like he had a pretty immediate bias about what the right decision was, like from the, like he'd sort of already formed an opinion, which is probably not the person you want to facilitate or mediate if he's kind of already, you know, like you really need someone kind of who's, you know, can really be impartial. And I think, yeah, I think the way it was presented, it didn't seem like he could really be impartial and allow them to work through and come up with a decision.
You know, it's funny in the donor advised world, sometimes, you know, if there is a lot of conflict in it, we end up splitting the funds because
If it's big enough, it just
yeah,
makes
if it's big enough, we will actually, that may be a solution that we come to, and that's okay, especially as you get into multiple generations of successor advisors and different families and geographic interests, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's an acceptable solution from our perspective, is to ask the family if they want to split the funds, and sometimes they will, or carve off a piece if they have a particular person that they'd like to have their own fund.
Yeah, Beth, I agree that we, while I haven't done a pure analysis of year over year, I would say we're seeing a bit more of a trend to, we need to dissolve this because there's a difference of opinions, this being a foundation and creating different avenues for, you know, we're working on one right now. It's a family foundation that just, I don't think it's a difference of opinion. I think it's just, I don't want to be involved with this anymore. I want the daughters to take over. And so we're merging it into two new entities for the daughters to take over and seeding it $1 million each, and, you know, more next year, I think. But as a whole, over the past 3.5 years I've been in this chair, I would say I've seen a bigger spike to the family foundation didn't work out in the Melton case that we're going to discuss to some degree. And, you know, what solutions are surfacing as a go-between.
Yeah, I agree.
We had an interesting one about 2.5 years ago where it was a family foundation, relatively small, I think, in the foundation world, $2.5 million, but still a lot of money. And the parents didn't want to do it anymore. They wanted it to go down. It was 3 sons and a daughter, all married, happily married. We brought them all together and everything and tried to, you know, just sort of talk this through. And the result of it was that the 3 daughters-in-law and the daughter took it on as their project, and they basically cut the boys out, right? And the boys weren't too interested in it, and but they got really excited about doing it together.
So fabulous.
Yeah,
That's great.
And going into that meeting, I hadn't even thought of that angle. You know,
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Fantastic.
You know what? Interesting, JR, because for that size foundation, a community foundation would have been perfect for them. Moving the fund over, having the daughters be the trustees, but would have gotten rid of all the back office worries. And if the community foundation had a medallion program where you could continue to manage the money as the financial advisor,
Right.
they wouldn't have had to, they'd have access to all the grant making software and the expertise of the community foundation staff, and get to network with all the other fund holders and learn a lot about what it is to be a foundation person. They're saying now that even it used to be anything less than 3 million, just put it with a community foundation. Now they're saying as much as 10, because the costs are just so high to run a private foundation.
Yeah,
But it sounds like you handled the conversation beautifully, JR. Good job.
Thanks. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know what I did?
how old were the girls?
Well, they were married.
I would say early 30s to mid 40s.
Wonderful.
And how
I'm
are they
curious.
doing with are they working well together still? Do you know?
Yeah, it's working great. It's
good.
working great.
Is there a
they were
provision?
they were a close family to begin with, but part of the interesting thing was the sons hadn't really engaged their wives in the decision of what was going to happen, but they were brought to the meeting by the parents, and maybe the parents had a inkling that maybe this is where it was going to go.
They planted that seed.
How wonderful. What a great story.
But everybody walked out of there thrilled,
So there was no structural change other than perhaps those that are now in charge of it.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Neat.
Could the guys jump back in at some point if they wanted to?
Probably not.
Ethan, I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really neat as a solution.
Great story. So our second story, positioning your practice and your process, Lou.
Yes, thanks, Francis. And you have to put a muzzle on me here, so I know we don't have that much time, but let me just kind of take it this way. I was trying to figure out how to present this, and I guess I'll just kind of overview it because I was really intrigued by this, and it really gets to the question of my own dilemma that I find in terms of practicing in this area. And I think Beth knows what I'm talking about because I've talked about it so many times in seminars and talks that I've given. I think everything that Phil presents in this section about positioning your practice is really, really good. I think the advisors that he talks about, that guy Rod Zeeb, who did the case study where he went to the lady's house and he interviewed her, or she interviewed him, if you will. And then also the other gentleman, Mark Weber. And I already ordered his book on the legacy spectrum because I'm intrigued by both of their presentations. The truth be known, back about maybe a year ago, I heard a seminar that was presented in Philadelphia at an American College of Trust and Estates Council, ACTEC seminar. And this gentleman got up and started speaking. I looked around the room to my colleagues who were pretty much premier estate planning lawyers in the Philadelphia area. And they're all kind of like scratching their heads saying, what's this guy talking about? And his topic was exactly what Mark Weber's talking about and Rod Zeeb about the legacy spectrum. It was talking about energizing your clients to be philanthropic. And he wasn't getting a very good reception. People weren't booing, but certainly afterward, I heard people saying, man, that guy, how do you do that as a lawyer? So it's a dilemma for a lawyer. And what I'd like to do in the time that I have is to say what I feel my dilemma is and to see what you feel from your own disciplines. But the issue is this in a nutshell. When Rod Zeeb talked about how do you answer the question, what do you do? If you say, well, I'm going to say, and this is what I do, this is how I'm going to change my answer. But the way I answer it now is, well, I'm an estate planning lawyer. I do wills and trusts and tax and estate planning, and I help people plan their estates and also help their families when they pass away to close their estates. That's pretty much my set answer after 44 years. I think Phil would argue, and some of these phrases that he used in his slide, I can't say this, but I mean, I don't even know if I can pronounce it, but he said, I'm a synthesizing generalist. Yeah. I don't know what that means. A trusted advisor, a charitable consultant, which I think is a pretty interesting answer. Something that is designed to try to intrigue somebody to maybe ask you a question as a result of just thinking, what you don't want to do is in that question, you don't want the person that you're answering to say, oh, I already have an estate planning order, because that kind of kills the conversation. So I was intrigued by that whole approach. And when Rod Zeeb went out and talked to the lady out of her vacation home, you know, he started with the number one thing, which was, well, let me tell you, what do you think I do? He asked her, what do you think I do? And then she answered, and he was just trying to get information. He was masterful in what he did. And I think that, you know, his approach, the 7-step approach he talked about, is very, very effective. Here's my dilemma, and I'll try to keep it short. We live in a world, at least we as attorneys do, where pretty much the motto is we're hourly rate people. And I personally don't think you can do this on an hourly rate. Because as soon as you tell a client, and now I'm talking about the legal discipline now, but as soon as you tell a client, you know, how do you charge? You only charge hourly X dollars an hour. Well, how, you know, they want to know, well, what's it going to cost? So as soon as you put yourself in that box, it's hard to get out of it. And it's hard to get into the discussions that Phil and all the other people are telling us we want to try to get into to kind of promote the third leg of the stool, which is the heritage process, this heritage design. You know, you have financial planning, you got estate planning, but there's this piece that people are missing, and that's, well, you know, what's your legacy? How do you want to be remembered? One question I thought was intriguing in one of these sub-slides in the heritage design section, I went on their website, and Zeeb said pretty much through his spokesperson, picture yourself 50 years out, and you're sitting at a table surrounded by your family. What do you want to see in that picture 50 years from now? How do you want your family to respond to the way that they were raised, the values that you instilled in them? And ask yourself that question, and then start getting into this discussion with a client. My clients, if I tell them I charge hourly, are probably going to say, Lou, you know, thanks for all this philosophical and psychological stuff about legacy, but, you know, I want you to do my will. And it's not enough. And I'm frustrated. I'm kind of like just anxious. I'm going to call. What I didn't say is what I was saying is, after that seminar back in November of last year, I called the lawyer that spoke. He's in Denver, and he's on Phil's list. He's one of the, Mark Gardner, I think his name is Gardner. I called him up. I said, listen, I went to him up to him after the talk, and I said, I was really floored by your talk. And I said, you really inspired me. I want to talk to you. So I called him up. He put me in touch with Phil, and then he put me in touch with Mark Weber, one of the other ones. I've called them all. And I said to them, I said, how do you do it? Because frankly, I'm struggling with how to do it. I'm inspired by, I'll tell you one story and then I'll open it up because I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on it. But I have a client that's a very good friend. He's a very successful engineer in Philadelphia. He's got his own company, he and his brother. And basically, I've been doing his estate planning for years. I know him well. I know his wife well. I know his kids well. His kids were in Scouts with my kids. And basically, we did everything together and still do. We're in the same church. So he called me and said, we want to update our plan. And I know he's philanthropic. I said, okay. So he had his financial advisor, a commercial bank, that put together what I would consider to be a relatively canned presentation. But I think it had a lot of good points in it. And we had a three-way between the bank, the client, and me, and to talk about it. And I said, so I'll call it John and Mary. It's not John and Mary. I said, John and Mary, what do you want to do? Let's call it a $25, $30 million estate. 3 kids. And Lou, we want to give each kid $3.5 million. And I was intrigued by that number. I said, well, why that number? Because I was thinking maybe he thought that the exemption was going to get down to 3.5 million or whatever. It had nothing to do with taxes. We feel that 3.5 million is all they need. So if you add it up, 3.5, that's 10.5. It's got 25 million. That means that the rest of that money is going to charity. I'm struggling with him because it's about a $15 million gift, and he's insistent on wanting to do a private family foundation, 501c3, the whole thing. I've really tried to push him into into the community foundation arena, but I think he's caught up in this idea of, I'd like to have my own independent family name fund. And I'm saying, John, you can do that, but keep in mind that down the road, if these things aren't really properly greased and done, you're going to find out at the end of the day when you're gone, your kids are going to come in and say, how do we get rid of this thing? How do we close it down? And then I'm saying to them, take it and give it to the community foundation. And they'll gladly take it and set up a fund there, and we'll close this thing down. But then he came back he said, Lou, you're always telling me to talk to my kids. So guess what we did? At Thanksgiving, we all vacationed out in Colorado. We were all together and we had a family meeting. And we talked about the plan that you're putting together. And I told him, I didn't tell him the number. I said, but you're each getting a set amount of money. It's not going to be the whole estate. But we want you guys to know that we're going to form this foundation and we want you to be involved in it right from the start. And they just each took on a whole new aura of enthusiasm for it. And my client is even more charged up about forming his own foundation. So, so my point is this, and again, I'm sorry, I'm going too long. But my point is just that I'm really struggling. I don't know how to take the next step. Because if you're caught in the world of the hourly rate, you're never going to be able to do it. Clients are looking for you to provide a commodity. And Phil has said, and he's right, that the practice is commoditized now. So, we can draft the nicest, intriguing wills of trust we can, but they pretty much at the end of the day say the same thing. I always tailor it to the client, but the bottom line is they see us providing a product, but not providing that third leg of the stool. And I'm 70 years old. I've been doing this for 44 years. If I'm healthy, I want to continue to do it. But frankly, I'd want to do it the way that Mark Weber and Phil Cabetta and Rod Zeeb are doing it. And I'm really having trouble figuring out how that's going to go. That being said, that's my read on what was said, and I'd love to have your input on either what I said or whatever you think is relevant to the conversation.
Well, I have a couple thoughts. This is like a super simple little thing, but I know that there are attorneys out there who once a year they take their client out to lunch and no fee involved. Let's just have a conversation where you're building the relationship. And because there's a reason you're called counselor. And I've often seen, particularly with clients with older attorneys who they've been together for 20, 30 years. I mean, it's a very close relationship. The lawyer, they so rely on this lawyer for so much guidance about a variety of different areas in their lives. They might have started out with somebody who was a real estate attorney because it was a real estate issue, but they stay with them and suddenly the person's their trust attorney. So that's just a tiny little idea. And I'm sure you do a million things like that anyway. I guess what I'm struck with about this family is that, first of all, it's their money, and this is clearly what they want to do. There is there's a chart that compares private foundations and community foundations, the pros and cons. And what you might want to share that with him and just say, listen, totally respect, you want to go in this direction, we will make it happen. But in good conscience, as your attorney, I want to make sure you understand the pros and cons so that you're making the best decision, so that you recognize the direction that you're going in and all the, I mean, and then that's just up to them. I mean, I think it's wonderful that they want to be so philanthropic and that their kids do too. If I wonder though why you didn't tell them the amount, because if they each know they're getting 3.5 million, but 15 is going into this foundation, I wonder if they'll be quite as enthusiastic.
My own personal preference is never talk to the kids about how much. I don't tell them about what the size of the estate is or whatever, but just concepts. And Matt and my client agreed with me on that. On the thing about lunches, just so, I mean, I want to make sure that you understand where I'm coming from on this. I've been very blessed with a good practice, and I think that my clients consider me as a counselor, and I think that they trust me. And I think that if I told them that I wanted to charge a little bit differently, they may consider it. But I think that the run-of-the-mill estate planning client is not ready for that conversation. As I said at the first meeting, when I asked the question, if you ask the question the wrong way, you're going to get the wrong answer.
Yeah.
If you ask the question, do you want to make any charitable gifts? 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be no. Charity starts at home. My family's first. I get that all the time. So what I try to do is I change the paradigm and ask questions about, so what do you want to accomplish? This guy, Mark Weber, on his website, if you go on it for free, they've got incredible amounts of work lists and tools that are incredible. How would we like our children to use their inheritance is one of them. But my point is this, that you got to get to that conversation, and then practically speaking, you have to figure out how you can make it not necessarily profitable, but certainly you want to break even and you want to be able to do a good job. But I think you have to get away from the hourly rate. You have to think about offering something for a fee, and say, instead of them having to worry about looking at the clock all the time. So anyway.
Lou, would it be possible and comfortable for you to sort of transition these clients and say to them, listen, I could do this on my normal hourly fee basis, or I can just do it on a flat fee. And here's what the flat fee is going to be. And we have a little saying in my office when we put a plan together and say we're putting together a life insurance proposal for somebody. What we always want to do before that goes in front of a client is make the sale in our head first, right? And what I'm hearing you say is that you haven't sold yourself on a flat fee yet. So you
No,
just have to.
I haven't. And JR, I think it's a great point, and I think it's the way we have to go. If you remember that little vignette with Phil, with Zeeb talking to the lady out in the mountains, at the end of the conversation, he was explaining how the process was going to work. And remember, he said, I don't like to use the word quarterback anymore. I'm kind of like the producer. And so I'm the producer, and I'm going to put together the team for you. And I'm going to just introduce you to the team, and they're all going to tell you how they're going to charge. And then once, by the way, I still don't know what he means when he says that he's a recovering estate planning. I'm going to call him and ask him that question, because I don't know what he means. I don't think he's in addiction and he's recovering from some substance or whatever. But my point is that to answer your question, I think we have to change the model. And he was saying at the end to that lady, one of the things he said that was really intriguing, he said, I'll then tell you what I'll charge for the estate planning piece. But then she said to me, I don't know if you remember, she said, well, will you be with me when I'm talking to all these other people? And then he said, yeah, and we'll talk about a retainer for that. And that's where he's got the flat fee coming in. He's going to be the producer, and he's got to have a fee for being the producer. And so it's not going to be tied in any product that he's producing or whatever like that. But anyway, JR, I think your point is absolutely right. And I think you're also right that I haven't gotten to the point. It's kind of so traditional in me. And I work in a firm, obviously, where there's pressures of how to charge. And we're all tied into this hourly rate, which I think is our biggest issue, frankly. Anyway.
I guess
Hey,
my one observation was that you heard from a lot of the different folks he was talking to was what I heard was, the hourly rate for the commoditized work is probably applicable to a majority of clients, but it's probably it sounded to me like there's only a small portion of the clients where they're going to have that level of depth to the conversation and a relationship, because how could you possibly go that deep with hundreds of clients? I mean, I think about that from the philanthropic side too, right? Like we have lots of donors we talk to, but then, you sort of pick and choose which ones, your relationship is different with certain donors for a variety of reasons. And, you go really deep into conversations and understanding them and their personal stuff that they share and their family. And, but there's lots of other donors that you have I might have a lovely relationship with. We have nice chat when they happen to call, and it's great. And I sort of liken that. I guess I think about that sort of the same way potentially for a legal practice where, you have a lot of clients that are very transactional and, they're perfectly professional and friendly even, but then you end up with sort of this, and how you get to the decision about who you deal with differently, I think is probably, in my mind, would be the big challenge of who do you then approach with, I can do all these things, but let's talk about a different approach. And that's where there's potentially this retainer for this sort of added level of service and depth and counsel. different way, but that's probably not something that would be a fit or wanted by a majority of clients who are really coming for the commoditized product.
Lou, you may have mentioned this earlier, or not. How old are the gentleman's children?
They're all in their 20s. One's about 29 with a child. The other one is single, about 28. The other one's 26. Yeah. They all get along. It's a great family, so it's all good.
So the
Hey,
one
Lou,
thing, sorry, go ahead, Ethan.
Lou, I don't want to well, I question whether I should throw this out there, but I'm going to. Do you have one client that you're really, really close to where you could say, hey, I'm thinking of taking my structure this way, and I'd love your input over like to Francis' point, the lunch, and I'm just curious if that's, I think if I equate that to something in my past life, it's I went to somebody that I respected and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And I would welcome your input. Whereas if they said, oh God, no, that's a horrible path, it doesn't damage something because you have such a firm footing of a relationship. Anyway, that's.
No, I think it's a great suggestion. And frankly, I've considered doing that, Ethan. And if I'm going to take the next step, that's probably the next step that I'll take, is to do it kind of like a test with some clients and see what they think, float it out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is a great conversation. We have a third where we've got 15 minutes left. This is really moved along beautifully. Ethan?
Nope.
Great transition.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, thanks, Lou.
Julie, you had your hand up, but she's on mute.
Mary's got to take her off mute again.
Sorry, Mary.
Oh, there I am. There you go. Thank you. No, I just, I can't relate to the attorney piece, but when I was reading it, what stood out to me a lot is Phil said, this is almost the exception to the rule. You don't do this with every single client. And I just think back to, like, if I extrapolate to my world, when I was an advisor in a bank, I had small business owners like mom and pop shops, bookstores, things like that. You can't treat them the same. And there's some that I didn't even talk about insurance or anything like that, because I knew the profile of this client is not going to be open to having an in-depth conversation. Some people would sit in my office and chat for hours about nothing. And then I would learn so much about their family dynamics, their background, where their parents were from, all those details. So when I was reading that, it really stood out to me that Phil said, this is the exception to the rule. You can't do this with your whole portfolio of clients, because A, they're not going to have the willingness to spend the money on something like this, because it's going to take days, right? Weeks, if you will. They'll have to do the exercise amongst themselves, and then you'll discuss it with them. So it's something to keep in mind as you venture into something new, if you don't mind me saying, that, even if you adopt this stance, it's not going to work for all the clients.
Good point.
Ethan.
Yeah, the Melton case. I have to say I struggled with how to sort of extract thought, cogent thought anyway, to sort of have a dialogue around it. And to, as I want to do, I create notes. And since I can't read my own handwriting, I have to type things out. And so I sort of just pulled a couple of things together, but it's a classic case. And the greatest quote the one thing that stuck with me the most out of this case was the quote about building the plane while you're flying in it without blueprints or a qualified pilot, right? I mean, that was it all came down to that. And I forget who suggested, perhaps Ellie, the advisor, dropped the ball because she really didn't tackle Fithian's how and why as well as perhaps should be done. And that it just continued to sort of snowball out of control. But, you starting with good intentions, 25 million, Let's do something. And so why I struggle, I think, is that I've been in so many roles over my working career, from a fundraiser, financial advisor, doing what I do now, consulting and advising high net worth individuals. What I do now, by the way, donor advised funds. And so I'm sort of conflicted which path to sort of pull down and sort of tackle from, that perspective of, from a fundraiser. So, but what I thought about is that we have all those various constituencies right here in front of me, all of you. So we all bring those different perspectives of how would we handle this? I know I would handle this like I do a lot when people look to me. First of all, I don't talk to a lot of the individual donors who ultimately set up donor advised funds with us. And I love it when I do get that chance. For those advisors that are new to this space, they know their client wants to do something because they heard it. They'll ask me to jump on a call, or if it's a really complex transaction, then I'll be on with a principal and we'll talk through the liquidity strategy. At any rate, it's pretty rare, just as an average. I don't get to speak to. And in my former role as a fundraiser, at some point in my past, that's all I did was relationship build and fundraise or friend raise, as it's really, I think, at the end of the day, what it is. So, as a donor advised fund person, I guess I'm a regional director for NPT. When I get those opportunities throughout the process of this course, I have been delighted that a lot of my thinking, which I've always I put out there to say, look, my mind is weird. I work backwards. What's the goal? And then I work backwards. And I'll use those words. I think I used them twice this week already, because it helps me understand what we're trying to accomplish. And it's just always been how I'm wired. But this course has sort of helped me put a little narrative to that process and what it's called and why we do it and the resulting outcomes from it. But at any rate, I was interested by the notion of, how would I handle this? And it goes to my thinking of, what are we trying to accomplish here, Ruth and Ron? You were really tight-lipped on what their plans were, the bulk of the estate or more from the estate, funding it, privacy issues. They've really just sort of set up for, I think Phil called it cordial chaos, as three generations tried to come together and, align to create a shared impact. But at the end of the day, how and when do you call in an expert? I don't know, if I were in those shoes, would I be able to sort of marshal the resources to say, hey, you got to have this person, this person, this person. I know where to go to get those answers, but I personally may not have them. At any rate, I guess I am curious how an attorney would have handled this versus a fundraiser. I don't really raise money in the sense that I used to. And so I'm curious what your take on the case was. But without belaboring into my point, which I'm doing, it's obviously there needed to be so much more set up. And those folks, ironically, the folks that answered, that were polled as the experts, I work with some of those people and I know exactly who they are. And I will say one thing, which is something I've used in some narrative, because I do a lot of presentations to the financial firms that we work with. And it's right here on my screen. And it says, research shows that when wealth moves from generation one to the second, the goal becomes less about generating more wealth and more about defining its purpose and legacy. The rising generations also tend to take a more collaborative approach to leveraging their wealth. And so it speaks more to relationship alpha. So if I was a fundraiser at a nonprofit, financial literacy is on the rise. I think I would be in tune to, hey, how do I become a trusted advisor, part of that third leg of the stool? And I think that can be really applicable no matter what role each of us does serve in, is that there is this rising generation of collaboration, impact investments, and less more about, hey, we got to crank this is 5 billion, we got to make it 10 billion. That doesn't seem to be pushing the agenda these days. And everything we're looking at and the results of my perspective of what I do is bearing out. So I'm going to shut up, but I would love to, if we have time for, how would you handle Melton case, Jason or Rebecca or Joey, anybody, if it said, hey, you've got to reach out to a strategic advisor and know when that needs to happen.
Don't everybody speak at once.
Oh, everybody's on mute. So everybody's mouths are moving, but no voice is coming through.
I think Delia has something to say. Do you, Delia?
No.
I was really torn with just putting on so many different hats from my past in looking at a case like this. But time and again, you get people that say, well, you know what, mom and dad's foundation idea or grandpa's foundation or grandma's foundation, just that concept doesn't work anymore. Too many disparate lives all over the globe. So it's why we see a ton of foundations converting to donor advised funds, because it just doesn't fit the model.
I think I agree with you. I think, the value of having to be going through this course right now, not speaking specifically for the case, but just the value as a fundraiser for the past 15 years to be going through this course one and through this program with you all has been really exciting and eye-opening for me. You may have heard me say that before, but now it's actually allowed me to think strategically and different for some of the donors that I work with. I absolutely agree with you. My role is specifically relationship building and getting to know people and helping them understand really how their philanthropic sources and resources can help the organization I work for. But through this course and through the assignment 10 and the mountain case, I kept coming back to the point where the question was, how do you know when to actually just raise the card and say, do you feel confident in being the trusted advisor here, or where are some of the resources where you can actually pull and gain and be confident? And not to limit my capability, but right now where I am with my career, I wouldn't be. That's not to say I will eventually, but I kept coming to the same questions, Ethan, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's I try to think it through as a fundraiser, as a financial advisor, in my world as a donor advised fund regional director. I sort of put on both those hats to say, well, here's what I would do. But I stopped leading. I stopped and I flipped the how and the why, and I went more to why. What is it you want? And I stopped consciously late last year selling because the region I cover, I've killed myself doing it, but have really expanded into a lot of markets. But I had a call from one advisor who said, look, what is this all about? I've got a guy, he wants to do one. He thinks it's going to be $25,000, your minimum. And he's real fee sensitive. And I said, you know what? I appreciate your honesty, because what you've done is you've given me permission to speak candidly, because I was once in your shoes and I remember making that call. Just tell me what the facts are. Do I need this for my client, or does he need to go somewhere else? And ultimately I said he needs to go somewhere else. And I gave him the name of my colleague who's quoted as one of the experts in here to say, hey, this is up your alley, not mine. This will just end poorly, so let's just go straight to the chase. And the advisor was like, you have no idea how much I appreciate just getting that. And I value that when I get it. When I get, hey, this isn't right for you. Or you take your car to be serviced and they're like, I could do that, but you don't need that right now. You can go another 10,000 miles. That kind of brutal honesty.
Mm-hmm.
That was a weird tangent. Sorry.
No, it's Miracle on 34th Street in action.
It's funny
You
though.
sent them to Gimbals.
I think as you become more comfortable in your role, you learn when maybe the fit is not right. And I actually say it's okay to say, we're not the right fit for you, given what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or alternative is to call in another expert and say, I think this might be another solution or route that we could find. And what I found is that that the donor or the potential donor or the prospect actually appreciates that, and that honesty to them.
Yeah.
And
it started late last year. A law firm asked me to come and co-present to a family office group of clients, and I presented with one of our competitors, and had never met him. We got to chatting because we both arrived an hour early, and his boss, I believe, when he was introducing me to her, said, "Look, there's so much work for all of us. There's no need that we need to step on each other's shoes. You've got a certain way of doing things," or basically she was saying, we have a certain way of doing things. You've got advantages that we don't have. We probably have some you don't. And it was so refreshing. It was disarming. Oh my gosh, there's somebody who's been around this block for a while and says, there's so much work for both of us and all of us in this space. And by the way, I view us as a conduit to getting money into nonprofit hands. The faster I can help monetize an illiquid position, the faster I can get it into your hands, in the nonprofit world. At least that's my take on one of my takes on it.
And
I'll say that really resonates what Beth was said, what Beth was saying, and Ethan. I mean, it really is. I think it telling a donor no in the right kind of way isn't a bad thing, right? I mean, I think that, I mean, there are obviously exceptions, but I think people really appreciate the honesty and the transparency, because if the answer should be no, but you say yes, you're doing both your organization and the donor a disservice down the road, and that there's no value in that.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings is a rising tide floats all boats. So I think, if we can all contribute philanthropically, that's to the good of the whole, as opposed to the good of just the individual.
Yes, it does.
Mary, did you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I think this was a great conversation. Thanks for Beth, thanks for letting me host. It's been probably the most fun I've had in a long time.
Sorry.
She has control.
Now she's gonna be muting everybody.
And
thank you.
I'm sorry I had to step away. Our call center actually called with a donor on the other end of the line, so I had to step away.
Wonderful.
That's a good reason, Joey.
It was. I thought you all would understand.
Yeah, I just want to, go ahead, Frances.
Can I just say one more thing? Last time we invited you all to the Chester County Community Foundation, to the Chester County Estate Planning Council event, and I wanted to invite you to the Delaware County Estate Planning Council event, which is Tuesday evening, January 12th, because we're going to have a panel of 3 planned giving people. One is David Toll, who I think a lot of you know is at Drexel. The other is Al Russo, who is a gift planning person at Penn Law, and I think is responsible for having secured the Carey gift that now they're renaming themselves the Carey Penn Law School. And the third person, Suzanne Barton, who's with Natural Lands, and they do a lot of land transactions. And the 3 of them are going to just sort of, stories from the field. And there's no fee involved. So I'll send you all a link, and you're more than welcome to sign up. And
thank you. I was looking on the website there, and I know you mentioned in our last meeting that the registration was is there a way to register, or you'll send us the link to?
Yes, I will do that.
I definitely want to do that.
Yeah, me as well.
Thank you, Frances. That's a great opportunity to learn from some experts.
Yeah.
When I'm not being a DJ, by the way, my wife says I have a face for radio, so I'm not sure how to take that. I'm not technically proficient, and I was pulling up an old link that seemed to be reserved for the November 11th discussion we had. And so I don't know where I missed something along the way, but will there be an additional link for our future meeting?
That's a good question. And not to keep everyone, but we're the inaugural group, and Beth, Frances, and I are kind of getting in stride ourselves with everything. We talked about it this afternoon. If the group would be open to Google Meets, I have to verify that we can record it for those who don't. I don't know the functionality there, but assuming Google Meets is an option moving forward, is there anyone who's had a particular problem with that? Or is everyone comfortable using it?
I've never used it. So
I don't think I've tried it, but I'm willing.
I don't know either way.
Yeah, me either, Lou.
I've never used it either.
Pretty straightforward.
Okay.
I feel like I've used everything.
Yeah. I've used it. It seems pretty user friendly. I don't know from the admin side. I'll tell you what, I'll report back. What I'd like to do is we're kind of doing a little patchwork system here. Beth has the Zoom account, and then she has to share that with others at the community foundation. So it's almost like a jump rope sometimes. But if we're able to, and we can use the Google link, then I can send out meeting invitations for all of the last remaining meetings, and then you'll have them on the calendar, and then you'll have that link right in there. So I'll work on that. Be in touch by email and see if that's something we can do. Otherwise, the next one will resume with the Zoom. In your calendar invitation, Ethan, if you didn't get that one, I apologize, but that you were added.
It was probably me. No, it was
Okay.
probably me.
Well, we're working together, so always email. You have my cell number. Text me if you can't find something, and we'll make it work. But
There it is. Yeah.
for that, before we meet again, when is our next meeting? January
20th.
20th. Okay.
All right.
And then good luck to everyone.
Yeah, good luck.
And
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, and have a
Stay
wonderful
safe.
holiday.
Yeah,
Great to see
holiday.
everybody.
Thank
Thank you all
Stay
for
safe.
presenting.
And thank you to our presenters.
yes, thank you.
Great.
Great
Happy
job.
holidays,
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, I learned a lot.
Really,
Happy
really
holidays.
really enjoyed all of this. Thank
Yeah,
you.
this
Me
was
too.
great. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a
All
nice
right. Cheers. We'll
Thanks,
think
guys.
of you this weekend. Keep us posted on your tests.
Got it.
Happy holidays, everyone. See you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.